everybody, and welcome to NFL Insiders. Wendy Nix here with Ed Werder, Jarrett Bell, and Hall of Famer Bill Polian. We'll start this afternoon with one of the bigger storylines of this offseason, the future of Tony Romo. In fact, the Romo watch continues. Since the emergence of Dak Prescott as the Cowboys' starting quarterback, it appears all but certain that Romo will move on. Jerry Jones has said publicly that he alone will make the decision regarding Romo, but it's widely believed he will work in tandem with the quarterback to find a suitable solution. Now, there are several routes he can take. The Cowboys can keep Romo, but his $24.7 million is the highest among any quarterback in the league. They could release him, but even that would cost them $20 million in 2017, and he would still have the highest cap hit on the Cowboys. They could spread that cap hit over 2 seasons by releasing him with a post-June 1st designation, or they can trade him. That scenario would likely require a restructuring of Romo's deal to give the acquiring team some financial assurances. Before we talk about where Tony Romo may end up, I'll just ask you, Ed, if there's any sort of timeline regarding the decision.
Well, not specifically, but you sort of get the sense that once Jerry and Tony get together and decide what direction they want to go and how they'd like to manage this and what they want the outcome to be, that around the combine would be a natural time for other teams to start, expressing interest in Romo, either directly to him or potentially through a trade. But I've been told that Romo expects to be released, not to be traded, and that's really the best possible outcome for him, because then he totally controls his future and can decide which team he wants to play for next. But he thinks he can start for 2 or 3 more seasons as an NFL quarterback, although certainly people will question the validity of that given his injury history. No question. And, Bill, from a team perspective, though, when we look at those options about trading and releasing or keeping him, what option makes the most sense?
Release actually makes the most sense, because you're not going to get a lot for him on the open market in a trade. A trade is complicated because of the contract. An acquiring team doesn't want that contract. Release gives you, with a June 1 designation, gives you cap relief this year and cap relief next year. So that makes cap room in this marketplace is really good for them, and it makes a lot of sense because they can use that for a defensive player. So it's as though they're acquiring something.
And in terms of Romo, that gives him enough time, does it, to make a decision?
Oh, yeah.
Even though it's June 1st?
Yeah, assuming March 9th would be the day upon which you do it, or that would be the deadline day, then it gives him plenty of time to find a team. And besides which, there are not going to be that many teams that he's interested in. There may be a lot of teams that are interested, but not a lot that he's interested in.
In terms of injury risk, how big a bill do you think this is compared to, like, the Peyton Manning injury?
Well, the Peyton Manning injury was one that was unexpected, and then all of a sudden it cropped up, and then Denver essentially bought the insurance to cover that. In this particular case, you're going to structure the contract in such a way that you'll protect yourself against injury, and Tony's going to have to recognize that that's the case.
And one thing to point out, if you talk about trade versus release, well, if you're a team that's interested in acquiring Tony Romo, basically it's a matter of just waiting. From the Cowboys' perspective, yes, this is part of the due diligence. You show Tony Romo, one of your signature players, obviously over the course of the past few years. You show him the proper respect by trying to work the process in that regard. But if someone wants to trade for Tony Romo with that injury history, with that contract and all of those elements that would be in play here, you just bide your time, and then you can get him on the open market.
You're not getting much in a trade anyway if you're the Cowboys.
He's played 5 games over the last 2 seasons. I think there has to be some perspective. As we look at some potential landing spots, we'll go through and look at the validity, if you will, of each. And the first that I think a lot of people are talking about are the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, and you talked about the Peyton Manning situation from a couple of years ago. Well, what's the difference with Tony Romo? Tony Romo had a tough time behind the Cowboys' offensive line, the best offensive line in football. Can you imagine him behind the Denver Broncos' offensive line, which has a lot of work that needs to be done to upgrade it? I think that could be a tough situation.
But again, he's 37 years old. John Elway won 2 Super Bowls late in his 30s, and Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl as a Bronco quarterback late in his 30s.
You would also think that's somewhere that Romo would not mind playing. This is interesting because the Chiefs would have to believe they sort of hit their ceiling with their current quarterback. But, Bill, what about the Chiefs?
I don't know about this. I think Andy Reid is really in bed with his quarterback. I think he feels that guy's invested a lot. He's invested a lot in him. I don't see that Tony, who's in a situation where He's part-time probably at best because of injury. You know, you have to look at that with a clear set of eyes, the green eye shade, so to speak. I don't see this.
And it's not like the Chiefs are a team that really doesn't have a guy in place in Alex Smith right now. So that's one of the differences here. It's like they're not desperate.
Alex Smith is mobile. Tony, at this stage of his career, is not.
That's also true. Now, the next situation, really different in Houston because they thought they had their guy. They made one of the bigger splashes of the offseason last year. I would assume Osweiler's contract would have to be restructured to make this work. But it does make sense on the surface.
Well, they owe Osweiler $37 million guaranteed over the life of his contract. It seems like he has to be a part of the equation in some way this year. But I think that Bill O'Brien and Tony Romo would be a good match. I think proximity to Dallas would be attractive to Tony for family considerations. And I think he looks at them as a team that he's probably the most curious about because of the quality of their defense, the ability with the offensive line, some pieces in place at center and left tackle to protect him. And they've got terrific young weapons in the passing game and at running back.
Yeah, if you talk about a team being one player away, a quarterback away, it's Houston, right? I mean,
well, I don't think they're one player away. I'm not sure those receivers are as good as people have made them out to be. But here's the one thing that they have, and you're going to need if you're going to bring in Tony. You better have a quality backup. Whether that's Savage or Osweiler is immaterial, but you better have a quality backup because you can't say Tony's playing 16 games.
You simply cannot. I would think that would be the number one prerequisite besides the offensive line.
Romo will make the receivers better than Osweiler made them, I bet you.
Well, you got to catch the ball, though, and Will Fuller doesn't.
You guys can do what you want, but I think we're going to be quick on this next one, but I'll let you decide. Well, if it comes up, here we go.
Bing. Boom.
Well.
Bam.
Oh, there we go. Third time's the charm. How about the Browns?
Move on.
Okay, I agree. Let's just keep going. Now, finally.
That's what Tony said.
Now, this situation, although unlikely, obviously because of the economics of the situation, can you see a scenario where Tony Romo stays in Dallas, Ed, as the backup quarterback?
I can't, and not just for the cap purposes. You know, Tony Romo's a competitive guy. If he's going to be there, he wants to have the opportunity to start at quarterback, and he's not going to get that opportunity with the rookie season that Dak Prescott just had and all the promise he presents to Jerry Jones, Jason Garrett for the future.
Well, and there's enough respect there, I think, mutual respect from Jerry Jones and Tony Romo to say, hey, if you think you can start, let's see if we can get you an opportunity.
I mean, Jerry would love for that to happen, but
yeah,
I don't think it's feasible.
Yeah, and the Cowboys
said Tony's very much focused on playing two or three more years as a starter.
Tom Brady has 5 Super Bowl rings and 4 Super Bowl MVP trophies to go along with them. But the 39-year-old quarterback shows zero sign of slowing down. Brady will turn 40 in August and was asked on Peter King's Monday Morning Quarterback earlier this week how much longer he would like to play.
I've got the answers to the test now. You can't surprise me on defense. You know, I've just seen it all. It's not that I'm, I've just been able to process 261 games. I've played them all. Now it's actually like, it's an incredibly hard sport, but because the processes are right and they're in place, for anybody with experience in their job, it's not as hard as it used to be. There was a time when quarterbacking was really hard for me because you didn't know what to do. And now finally you get to a point where you really know what to do. I don't want to stop now. A lot of things need to go your way. But, I mean, I'd like to play till my mid-40s. And then I'll make a decision. If I'm still feeling like I'm feeling today, who knows? Now, those things can always change, but you do need long-term goals too. I mean, I know next year is not going to be my last year. I take care of myself for a reason because so I can do that and accomplish that. And if I want to try to accomplish that, those are the choices I'm going to make.
Wow, if Brady is going to play into his mid-40s, he will have to defy Father Time. The record for most starts by a quarterback after their 40th birthday is 25. That is shared by Warren Moon, Vinny Testaverde, and Brett Favre. That would put Brady's expiration date at about less than 2 more full seasons, which clearly he disagrees with. And at this point, he may, in fact, be correct. That begs the question what to do with Jimmy Garoppolo, because if Brady's going to play for quite some time, he's insurance and he's a solid backup quarterback, but is he too expensive, or can you make a case, Bill, for keeping him right where he is?
Oh, you can make a case for keeping him. It's probably the stronger case. The bottom line is that Branch Rickey, who is the greatest team builder of all time, said the only one you can win is the one you can win now. The Patriots are built to win now. They're not a team that necessarily develops young players. They go out in the free agent market and fill needs year after year. And they've got Tom Brady. But as I learned through sad experience, your quarterback can always get hurt. And it's not the issue of the injury itself. It's the issue of coming off the injury after you pass age 39. That's the dividing line. There's only 3 quarterbacks, and 2 of them are in the Hall of Fame that have played that well past age 39. So the bottom line is it can come at any time, and you have to be prepared with the backup.
That's what's interesting about this, because while it seems certain right now that Brady can play for the foreseeable future, you don't know. It can change on one play. And if I'm the Patriots, I want a guy that's been in my system as long as Garoppolo and can fill in admirably.
Well, talking to people in the organization during Super Bowl week, and then people outside the organization who are very familiar with the way they view players and build their team, the point that was made to me was they may have developed the guy who's going to be their starting quarterback for 10 or 12 years whenever Tom Brady retires. They're not just going to let that guy walk out of the building for a second or a third round draft pick, or maybe even a late first. They've invested 3 years in Jimmy Garoppolo, and in the 6 quarters that he played as their starter this year, they thought he established himself as the best young quarterback prospect in the NFL. He obviously can execute their system in a way that Jacoby Brissett cannot right now, and so he has value now and potentially well into the future for the Patriots.
Yeah, but one thing to consider with that, and maybe Jacoby Brissett will take another step this year and another step after that, it's the idea of what you can get for Jimmy Garoppolo. Maybe you get that first-round pick, mid-first-round pick, and now is the time that you make that move. I think that's just part of the equation, obviously, with Jimmy Garoppolo being a potential person that teams might pursue when you look at the quarterbacks that are coming out in the draft. You can't do much worse than Jimmy Garoppolo if you're a team looking for a quarterback.
He's well ahead of anybody that's in the draft. But I will say this. They're angling for a blockbuster 3rd pick in the draft, 1st pick in the draft. I think anything below the 5th pick in the draft, that's not what they want. If they can get a blockbuster where they can turn around and get
they might be able to.
If they can get a defensive difference maker, then they got to really think about it, because it carries with it financial relief too. Don't forget, you get the 3rd player in the draft or the 1st player in the draft, you're talking about a guy that's cheap for the next 6 years. As opposed to Jimmy Garoppolo, who's going to cost you next year if you keep him or he leaves for nothing.
Let me make one quick point. When you talk about the durability and longevity of Tom Brady, and then you look at Jimmy Garoppolo, who started his 2nd game and got hurt, I think there's something to be said for the unpredictability of a Tom Brady, but also for an unpredictability of a Jimmy Garoppolo if he were the guy who had to play and had to withstand NFL hits over the course of a long season. I think that's something that teams pursuing Jimmy Garoppolo and a team that has Jimmy Garoppolo right now thinking about the future also have to work into the equation.
No question that's why you don't make that blockbuster deal. You don't give up the 3rd pick in the draft or the 1st pick in the draft or the 12th pick in the draft to get a guy who's played 1 1/4 or 1.5 games and got injured. That's as good as he is. And believe me, I was his strongest proponent in the draft process. He's good. But I don't know if I give up that much.
Garoppolo posted a 91 total QBR in his 2 starts this season. 2 starts, though. That's the highest QBR of any player in his first 2 career starts over the last decade. The Dolphins do plan to release several veteran players, as the NFL Network first reported. Offensive tackle Brandon Albert among those players. By cutting Albert, the Dolphins save just over $7 million on their cap, and according to the Miami Herald, defensive end Mario Williams also let go. Williams, who only had 1.5 sacks last year, clears $8.5 million in cap space.
Hi, this is Maury Moreland Morrison, here to tell you Geico has more than just great savings. Much more. Yes, while Geico could help you rack up more moolah faster than you can say metamorphosis, they've also been the fastest growing auto insurer for more than 10 years. That's more like it. Furthermore, Geico has fast and friendly claims service. That might seem like an oxymoron, but it's not. All the more reason to say no other auto insurer has more than Geico. Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
Adrian Peterson is due $18 million in 2017. That's led to speculation his playing days in Minnesota are over. Then Peterson raised some eyebrows with this tweet. The Giants have been making some interesting moves, perhaps referring to the release of Victor Cruz and Rashad Jennings. The Giants, if you don't remember, were 29th in rushing last season. So the question, could you see Adrian Peterson making his way to New York, Ed?
I think he's suggesting that they should keep a spot open for his potential availability.
Tampering on his own behalf.
Reverse tampering, right?
I think he's going to be like Romo in terms of trying to find a team that's a good fit for his skill set that is him away from reaching the Super Bowl. So a team like New England would seemingly fit. Seattle might fit. If they're, concerned about Thomas Rawls, they didn't quite get the productivity out of him that they thought they would from a durability point of view. So, yeah, I think he fits. He's 32. Something's got to be decided by March 11th when he gets a $6 million roster bonus.
And the other thing, you think when he was at ESPN a couple of weeks ago, he mentioned Tampa Bay and Houston as other possibilities of teams he would be interested in. So, obviously, he's sending these signals out for a reason.
Yeah, he said he'd like to stay in Minnesota, but he didn't mince words. He was very clear he was willing to move on also.
Not in the cards.
Yeah, it doesn't
appear. Not at that money.
Do you see a scenario where he does stay?
No, I can't.
Minnesota?
No, I think there are too many other opportunities for him. It's going to require a restructured contract and probably a lot of it incentivized. But the bottom line is that he's going somewhere else, I think.
And just like we have these conversations about Tony Romo and what you can or cannot expect or project from a health standpoint, same thing with Adrian Peterson. But then when you think about Adrian Peterson and how he has defied nature before with his body, you wonder if he has another run at that.
Generally speaking, though, 2 injuries back-to-back that's a really big red flag.
Yeah.
He's only played 20 of the Vikings' last 48 games.
Yeah, again, another red flag. The Vikings, as you mentioned, Ed, have until the 3rd day of the league year, that's March 11th, correct, to release Peterson or pay him a $6 million roster bonus. So the decision likely to become before that. Terrell Owens continues his campaign against the Hall of Fame after he was not voted in as part of the 2017 class. His latest comments, courtesy of 1270 The Fan in Buffalo.
When it comes to questioning my character and what I did in that locker room, the thing what a lot of people are missing is these coaches and these people are saying that I'm this type of person in the locker room. Well, who are those guys? Nobody's attaching any names to anything. They're just saying, this is what I heard. If you go look at a number of social media outlets and platforms, I've had a number of players that have played with me that have come out and said nothing but great things and said nothing, basically the polar opposite of what they're claiming as far as me being a locker room distraction or being divisive.
Well, Jarrett, you are in that room, and I know you've been a Hall of Fame voter for 20 years. How did the discussion, probably more accurately, the debate around T.O. compare to others you've had over the years?
Yeah, it was one of the more intense debates that we've had. And we've had a number over the years with a lot of different candidates. But I think there's a lot of gray area here on what the criteria really is in terms of what you should or should not consider when it comes to Owens and players who may have questions about things that happened off the field. And I voted for Owens, and I believe the reasoning for me was started with my eyeball test. I look at him, I see a Hall of Fame player who had that type of impact. But the discussion, the narrative with Owens has gone beyond that, and that was the thing that he was referencing in terms of what people say about him and whether or not he was a distraction to the team and how it affected what happened inside the line. So, big debate.
Well, I mean, he had some control over how he's perceived by his teammates, and you can't judge him just strictly on the fact that he played for 3 different teams, because Jerry Rice played for more teams than that, and that wasn't an issue with him. But the fact that he got cut by Jerry Jones after being publicly reassured that he would return, and the Cowboys lost one of their best players from a competitive team and took a $10 million cap hit, speaks a lot to the issue that he caused in Dallas.
Well, and that's Jerry Jones, who, you have to push the envelope pretty far for him
they had to bring a lot of people to Jerry Jones to convince him that he was detrimental to team chemistry and how important that is.
And now Jerry says T.O. should be in, but okay.
Well,
the
bottom line is I don't think he's helping his cause.
Yeah.
Because people who are opposed to him are going to listen to this and become more opposed.
Yeah,
I think that's the question here. Is he doing more damage to his potential chances down the road? And I would agree with you, Bill. If I was a voter, I wouldn't like it.
Should not matter. I'm still
alienated media people vote.
There you go.